When I normally sit down in my room to set up these YouTube videos, it's normally this really happy kind of ritualistic thing where I'm setting up the lights and setting up the camera and getting everything positioned correctly in the scene, but there's just an air of darkness today. I knew of the passing of Neil for a few days now, and it's just really something I don't like thinking about. You know, Rush was one of those bands that you just, if you're a hardcore fan, you just think that they're just always going to be around. Their career was almost as long as the Rolling Stones. It's just like, no, of course, Rush is always going to be around. I mean, whether or not they're still touring or putting out albums, just the thought of those three guys still being on this earth was something that brought me great joy. But January 7th, Neil Peart passed away from brain cancer, something that he had been dealing with for 3.5 years, and it was a closely guarded secret. And as a Rush fan, if you know anything about Neil, he's very reluctant to let people in on his personal life, let alone if he has some really tragic, you know, wasting disease like brain cancer. But if you know anything about me, you know that Rush is one of, if not my favorite band of all time. They've gotten me through some really rough times, especially in middle school and high school, where I just felt, you know, like an outcast. And this album in particular, Signals, I mean, I just clung to it like a safety blanket. I loved the music, I loved the instrumentation, I loved the lyrics, the sounds, the textures, everything. I mean, this is still one of my favorite albums of all time. And the very first song I heard by Rush that even got me into them was Tom Sawyer on the radio off of Moving Pictures. So I felt it was important for me to have these two albums up here. But it's just really depressing beyond belief that Neil is gone. And I would just like to talk a little bit about his life and his career, and, you know, we can discuss it and maybe bring some closure, for me at least. Neil Peart was such the anti-rock star, anti-bullshit kind of guy. He shunned fame and such notable songs as Limelight. He was always seeking knowledge and truth, and his writings reflected that. Erudite and meaningful, Neil almost considered himself an author first, drummer second. As far as rock drummer stereotypes go, he defied them all. The man played like a machine, so much so he still receives criticism from the more feel-oriented drummers. His drum parts were tasty though, that's why he is one of the most air-drummed musicians there is. If you've ever seen a Rush concert, you're sure to see a bunch of dudes in the crowd flailing their arms, trying to mimic Neil's percussive acrobatics. That, to me, transcends mere timekeeping. When you can write something rhythmically that people can't help but to air drum to, that's a true artist. Neil was the lyricist in Rush, and personally I loved that. His lyrics shifted from fighting fictional dictatorships and slaying dragons in the 1970s to more introspective existential pondering in the 1980s. This was the time period that I connected with most lyrically. I have and still do want to get the line "illusions are painfully shattered" right where Discovery starts from the song Emotion Detector tattooed on my body somewhere. That statement just sums up my belief system in a nutshell. I would be remiss not to mention the tragedies Neil faced in the middle period of his life. He lost his only child, Selena, in a car accident on her way to college. 10 months later, he lost his wife to cancer. Most people would have just given up at that point, but not Neil. He hit the road and traveled by motorcycle all through North America for a year, trying to find a reason to live. He eventually found peace and a new wife, and returned to write 3 more albums with Rush. After so much tragedy, we are lucky as fans to have gotten an extra 20 years out of Neil after all that tragedy. After 1998, most men, after losing their wife and kid, probably would have ended their own life, if not crawled into a deep pit of despair, never to crawl out again. Let alone a musician who has, famous rock star musicians have a tendency to overindulge and do drugs and other excesses that, you know, get you caught into some kind of trap, but not Neil. I mean, he was able to go and ride his motorcycle throughout North America and really find a meaning and a reason to live. And we got 20 plus years, well, about 20 years extra out of Neil after 1998, when for all intents and purposes he should have quit and never returned to music again. So I'm thankful for that, and you should be too. I mean, I didn't even get into Rush until like 2000 and, I don't know, 2004, 2003. So, I mean, if they had retired, they would have not even been a band before I even got into them. So we're lucky that we got that much extra of Neil that we did. And, you know, he was, for all intents and purposes, able to live a productive and meaningful life after those horrible tragedies in his life. So now I want to kind of address some thoughts that people might have in their heads about Rush and Neil, and, you know, any thought of, oh, well, now that Neil's gone, we're never going to have a Rush reunion. Though that is true, had he not been diagnosed with this illness and had he not passed away, you still wouldn't have had a Rush reunion, folks. I'm sorry to say. First off, Neil was suffering from arthritis, and he had some, I think, plantar fasciitis or something going wrong with his foot. He was getting older. He was not in the physical condition to play up to the standard that he was accustomed to playing at. He even, I believe Alex Lifeson said in an interview that Neil even said that himself, that he is not physically able to play to the standard that he was able to play to. And Neil, being the perfectionist that he was, there's no way that he would have went on the road and played any shows had he felt like he wasn't able to deliver 100% of his typical standard of drumming. So with that being said, just know that if Neil was still around, the band would still not be getting together, and I doubt any new music would have come out of the studio from Rush because, like I said, I mean, unless they decide to dial down their music and become like a blues band or something, which I just don't ever see happening with them, that, you know, I just don't think they would have ever gotten back together. Now, I mean, for me, it just sucks that Neil's no longer here. It doesn't suck that I'm like, oh, now Rush is never going to get together. They weren't going to get together anyway. So I just wanted to clear that up for anybody who might have any kind of misconceptions that, oh, now I'm never going to see Rush because, you know, Neil's gone. You weren't going to see him anyway. So as sad as that is, you know, I felt necessary to kind of point that out. But I don't know. I just, it's, you know, like I said, this video isn't fun to make. It's awful that this has happened, and I was at least looking forward to maybe getting some more writings from Neil as he got older, maybe some kind of an autobiography or something, or I don't know. His writings were brilliant. His lyrics were brilliant. Thinking about his lyrics now makes me emotional to even, you know, consider a lot of the lines that he wrote, because they were just so pungent and potent. Especially the stuff that he wrote in the 80s on a lot of the albums that critics and fans have panned, like, you know, Grace Under Pressure and Power Windows and Hold Your Fire. Those have some really, like, grown-up, just well-thought-out lyrics that only someone who was kind of getting into their 30s and kind of looking at their life and where they were at that time and contemplating the big existential questions of their life at that time would write. So anyway, I hope you, I almost said I hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope you enjoyed it on some level, but I hope more than anything that, honestly, I'm just doing this for me. I feel the need to pay him respect. I will still air drum to his songs whenever they come on. I will still play Rush's music until I die. And, you know, rest in peace, Neil. Thank you for everything that you gave us for the 5,000 years that Rush was around, and, you know, I hope you're in a better place now. For everyone else, thank you for watching, and next week I will have up the video that I've been talking about forever now, bands with 2 lead singers. So until next time, have a good rest of your night.